What's up, everyone? Just when you think you've seen it all, these cases will prove you wrong. You're convinced you know how it ends, until the unthinkable happens. These 15 cases will grip you with twisted turns that send chills down your spine. Stories that start off eerie and spiral into something far more sinister. Some are so shocking, they feel straight out of a movie, but every single one is real. And just when you think you've figured it out, another twist will leave you speechless. Let's dive into the cases that will haunt your mind long after this video ends. Number 15. The disappearance and reappearance of Michaela Garecht. What happens when a case goes cold, only to come to a shocking resolution after 30 years? Michaela Garecht was just 9 years old when she was abducted in 1988 in Hayward, California. The investigation turned into a chilling cold case until DNA technology cracked the puzzle in 2020. Authorities linked her disappearance to a serial killer who had been in prison for years. The twist? The suspect had been living behind bars the entire time, and the case went unsolved until cutting-edge science gave it a resolution. A life lost, then found again. How can something so horrific get so twisted? Number 14. The murder of Jennifer Bastian. What if the murderer of a young girl was someone entirely different than suspected? Jennifer Bastian, a 13-year-old girl from Tacoma, Washington, was murdered in 1986. Initially, the case seemed to connect to another local murder, but decades later, DNA evidence came into play, revealing that two separate killers were behind the tragedies. Can you imagine the relief and horror of discovering the true faces behind such dark crimes decades later? Number 13. The case of Annie Kasprzak. In 2012, 15-year-old Annie Kasprzak was reported missing in Draper, Utah. Just hours later, her body was discovered near the Jordan River, brutally beaten. Investigators initially suspected her boyfriend, but as they dug deeper, the case took a shocking turn. Annie had confided in her boyfriend that she was pregnant, a claim that was later proven false. When police questioned him, his alibi checked out, forcing them to re-examine the evidence. Then, a critical tip changed everything. A witness reported seeing a car near the crime scene the night Annie disappeared, and forensic evidence led detectives to an unexpected suspect, 18-year-old Manuel Jesus Socorro. Socorro, a former acquaintance, had lured Annie under false pretenses before violently attacking her. His motive was unclear, but the betrayal and brutality stunned investigators. After years of delays and false leads, justice was served when Socorro was convicted in 2016. The case highlighted the dangers of deception and the tragic consequences of misplaced trust, reminding us that sometimes the truth is far more complex than it seems. Number 12. The twisting tale of Lisa Theris, a shocking survival story. Lisa Theris's disappearance on July 18, 2017, unraveled into one of the most bizarre cases of survival and deception. A young radiology student from Alabama, Lisa vanished after a tumultuous breakup and a series of life changes. Police investigations linked her to two men, Davis and Oswald, suspected of robbery and possibly more sinister acts. Conflicting stories from the duo led authorities to fear the worst, and Lisa was pronounced dead. Yet, against all odds, Lisa emerged nearly a month later, stumbling out of the woods alive, but gravely injured. Her body bore marks of a harrowing ordeal: severe weight loss, insect bites, and sunburns. Lisa recounted a surreal story of being drugged and abandoned, with her survival baffling investigators and proving that truth is indeed stranger than fiction. Number 11. The resurrection of Nicholas Barkley. What if the person you thought was lost forever walked back into your life, but wasn't who they seemed? In 1994, 13-year-old Nicholas Barkley disappeared in Texas, and years later, a young man claiming to be Nicholas resurfaced in Spain. The family embraced him, but the shocking twist? The imposter was Frédéric Bourdin, a French con artist. This bizarre story of deception and impersonation left everyone questioning the very nature of truth. How could something so twisted remain hidden for so long? Number 10. The capture of the BTK killer. For decades, Dennis Rader, infamously known as the BTK killer, bind, torture, kill, terrorized Wichita, Kansas, committing a series of brutal murders between 1974 and 1991. Then, he vanished, leaving the case cold. But in 2004, after years of silence, Rader made a fatal mistake. He began taunting law enforcement again. He sent letters, cryptic messages, and finally, a floppy disk to the police, believing he was untouchable. However, investigators extracted metadata from the disk, tracing it back to a computer at Rader's church. This digital slip-up led to his arrest in 2005, unraveling a case that had haunted investigators for years. In the end, it wasn't his cunning that sealed his fate. It was his own arrogance. Number 9. The Grim Sleeper's hiatus. What if the killer you thought had vanished never really left at all? Lonnie David Franklin Jr., dubbed the Grim Sleeper, carried out a series of brutal murders over decades. For a troubling 14 years, he seemed to stop. But the chilling truth came to light. The killer had never ceased his actions. He was still out there, slipping under the radar for years while his crimes went unnoticed. How could such an insidious criminal go on for so long, leaving the public in the dark? Number 8. The unveiling of the Green River Killer. What do you do when the killer you've been searching for all along passes a lie detector test? Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, was a suspect in a series of murders spanning decades, but he passed a polygraph test with ease. He continued his spree for years, unnoticed by the authorities, until DNA evidence finally exposed the horrific truth. How did Ridgway manage to evade capture for so long, all while being so close to the investigation? Number 7. The East Area Rapist's double life. Could the person you trust the most actually be hiding the darkest secret of all? Joseph D'Angelo, identified as the East Area Rapist, led a life as a family man and former police officer. What shocked the world was that his position in law enforcement allowed him to elude capture for decades. This double life wasn't just a twist. It was a revelation that sent shockwaves through the entire justice system. Imagine realizing that someone so close to the law could be the very monster you've been hunting. Number 6. The case of the disappearing wife. What happens when your entire life is built on lies? In 2004, Lori Hacking vanished without a trace. Initially, her husband Mark was distraught, until the twist came. He had fabricated key aspects of his life, including his education and career. Lori's murder wasn't just about covering up a disappearance. It was about covering up a web of lies that would have destroyed him. The shocking truth behind the twisted crime left investigators and the public in utter disbelief. Can you imagine being caught in the snare of a lie so enormous? Number 5. The unraveling of the West Memphis Three. In 1993, 3 young boys were brutally murdered in West Memphis, Arkansas. Almost immediately, suspicion fell on 3 local teenagers, Damian Echols, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miskelly. The case was fueled by hysteria, misleading interrogations, and claims of satanic rituals. Despite weak evidence, the teens were convicted. Echols sentenced to death, Baldwin and Miskelly to life in prison. For nearly 2 decades, they fought for justice. Then, in 2011, DNA evidence failed to link them to the crime, exposing flaws in the case. Instead of a full exoneration, they were released under an Alford plea, maintaining their innocence while still legally convicted. Their story remains a chilling reminder of how fear and rushed judgments can lead to devastating miscarriages of justice. Number 4. The Mystery of the Somerton Man. In 1948, a well-dressed, unidentified man was found dead on Somerton Beach in Australia. No ID, no signs of struggle, just a cryptic note in his pocket reading Tamam Shud, meaning ended in Persian. The case baffled investigators for decades, fueling theories of espionage, secret identities, and hidden messages. Then, in 2022, DNA analysis finally put a name to the mystery. Carl Webb, an electrical engineer from Melbourne. But the biggest question remains: why was he there? And what led to his death? No clear answers exist, keeping this case alive in the public imagination. Even with his identity uncovered, the secrets surrounding the Somerton man continue to haunt and intrigue the world. Number 3. The boy in the box identified. In 1957, the body of a young boy was found inside a cardboard box in Philadelphia, battered and malnourished. With no identity and no one coming forward to claim him, he became known only as the boy in the box. For over 65 years, investigators searched for answers, but the case remained one of America's greatest mysteries. Then, in 2022, genetic genealogy finally revealed his name, Joseph Augustus Zarelli. While the discovery brought long-awaited closure, it also raised new questions. Who was responsible for his death, and why was he abandoned? Though his identity is now known, the truth behind his tragic fate remains elusive, proving that some mysteries continue to haunt us, even after decades of searching. Number 2. The Hinterkaifeck murders. Can you imagine a case so eerie that it still terrifies people a century later? In 1922, a German family was brutally murdered on their remote farm, but the plot thickens when you learn that the killer lived among the family's bodies for days before vanishing without a trace. The eerie silence surrounding the murder, combined with the bizarre way the killer evaded capture, makes this case one of the most twisted mysteries of all time. Number 1. The Isdal Woman. In November 1970, hikers in Norway's Isdalen Valley discovered the charred remains of an unidentified woman. Investigations revealed she had traveled across Europe using multiple aliases and carried various passports, suggesting possible espionage activities. All identifying labels on her belongings were removed, and her cause of death was determined to be a combination of carbon monoxide poisoning and barbiturate overdose. Despite extensive efforts, her true identity and the circumstances leading to her death remain unknown, making the Isdal woman case one of Norway's most enduring mysteries. So, what do you think? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more eye-opening stories and insights.